$400,000 for renovations or get out. My mother-in-law's shriek pierced the morning calm. I smiled, dragging my suitcase out the front door without a second thought. But that very night, as I slept soundly in a hotel, that luxurious house suddenly plunged into darkness. My husband called, his voice a panicked wail. "Sarah, please." It turned out to be the house deed. That morning, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon should have set a warm tone at the breakfast table. Instead, the loud thud of a thick stack of architectural plans tossed onto the glass table shattered everything. My plate trembled slightly. I looked up at my mother-in-law, Mrs. Miller, who stood with her hands on her hips, a forced smile stretched across her face. A smile I knew always came with a price. "Look at this, Sarah, David." Mrs. Miller chirped, her voice shrill, filling the dining room that was, in my opinion, perfectly livable. I put down my fork, swallowing hard. David, my husband, who sat beside me, only hunched over, pretending to be engrossed in stirring his coffee. I had a bad feeling. Slowly, I pulled the stack of papers closer. "What is this, Mom?" I asked softly. "That's our future blueprint." Mrs. Miller's eyes sparked, but not with affection, rather with ambition. "I just had a meeting with Carol's interior designer. You know Carol's house in Greenwich, right? Absolutely magnificent. Well, I want this house completely renovated. Tear down that living room wall. Replace it with Italian marble. And this kitchen is so old-fashioned, Sarah. I want a minimalist gold and black kitchen set, and the garage has to be expanded. Who knows? Maybe Kevin will get a new car soon." I flipped through page after page. The designs were indeed beautiful, incredibly luxurious, like the lobby of a five-star hotel. But my eyes widened when I saw the last page. There, written in bold, was the estimated total cost, the budget plan. $400,000. $400,000. My breath hitched. My heart felt like it was hit by a sledgehammer. $400,000? My voice trembled, half in disbelief. "Mom, that's not a small amount of money. That's the price of a brand new house in the suburbs." Mrs. Miller waved her hand dismissively, then sat down at the head of the table as if she were the Queen of England. "Oh, for our combined comfort. That's cheap, Sarah. Besides, this house, a legacy from your late father, is old and full of termites. If we don't renovate now, when? I'm embarrassed when my bridge club comes over. The house looks so drab. The paint is faded. But Mom," I tried to remain calm, though my blood was starting to boil. "We just replaced the roof last year, and that was with my annual bonus. The walls were just repainted last Thanksgiving. This house is still perfectly fine. Fine for your country bumpkin tastes." Mrs. Miller cut me off sharply. "To me, it's a bird's nest. I don't care. I've approved the design. The contractors are coming next week." I turned quickly to David. "David, aren't you going to say anything?" $400,000, David. Where will we get the money?" David finally looked up. The face that once made me fall in love with his calm demeanor now reeked of cowardice. He glanced nervously at his mother, then at me with a pathetic, pleading look. "Well, if Mom wants it that way, we'll just have to make it work, honey." David mumbled softly. "Make it work? How?" I asked, my voice rising. "Your salary is barely enough to cover Kevin's jet ski payments, and you sometimes borrow from me. Our savings. I mean, my savings." "Ah, exactly," Mrs. Miller interrupted, clapping her hands loudly. "Your savings, Sarah. I know you have savings, Sarah. You're a manager at a big company, a good six-figure salary. David told me your savings are almost $1 million, aren't they? And you're so stingy about spending $400,000 to make your mother-in-law happy." I froze. My eyes darted sharply to David. He told his mother about my private savings, the money I'd painstakingly saved since before we were married, the money I clung to as an emergency fund because I knew my husband couldn't be relied on financially. David told her? I asked coldly. David stammered, Mom asked yesterday, honey, and I told her the truth. We're husband and wife. Your money is our money too. Our money? I laughed bitterly. David, in the 5 years we've been married, I've covered 80% of this house's needs. Electricity, water, groceries, even your cigarette money and Kevin's allowance. It all comes from my wallet. That savings was my safety net. It's for our old age or if we get sick. Not for Italian marble. Mrs. Miller slammed her hand on the table. My bacon jumped off my plate. Umph, you insolent daughter-in-law. How dare you argue with your husband and mother-in-law? A husband's money is his wife's, but a wife's money should be used to serve her husband's family. Don't be selfish, you. This isn't selfishness, Mrs. Miller. This is common sense. I stood up, unable to sit any longer. I will not spend $400,000 on unnecessary renovations. Period. The atmosphere instantly became silent. But it was a chilling silence. Like the seconds before a bomb explodes, I went into the bedroom and slammed the door. My body trembled with anger. It wasn't just about the money, but about David's betrayal. He had leaked my financial secrets to his greedy mother. 15 minutes later, David came in. He quietly locked the door, then sat on the edge of the bed where I was massaging my temples. Honey, he called softly. The same old strategy to appease. Don't talk to me if you're just going to ask me to cash out my investments, I replied without turning. Honey, please try to understand Mom's situation. David scooted closer to me. Mom is old. Her only joy is this house and her bridge club friends. Yesterday, she was humiliated by Aunt Carol because our living room ceiling had a small leak stain. Mom was so embarrassed, honey. As a son, I want to do my duty. I turned, giving him a sharp look. Do your duty with your own sweat, David. Not your wife's. If you want to renovate your mother's house, then go earn the money. Work overtime, get a second job. Don't use my savings as a cash cow. David sighed deeply, his face sour. Why are you so calculating now? You weren't like this before. You said you loved me. You'd accept my family as they are. Accepting doesn't mean letting myself be bled dry, David. I pointed at his chest. Kevin, your brother, is 25 years old. But all he does is play video games in his room. I buy his food. I pay for his internet. You pay for his jet ski payments with the money that should be for groceries. Now your mother is asking for $400,000. Do you think I'm a walking ATM? Kevin is just finding himself, honey. Don't bring my brother into this. David defended Kevin in a loud voice. Strange. He was braver yelling at me than contradicting his mother. Finding himself? He's gambling online every night. That's what he's finding. Watch your mouth, Sarah. David snapped. I stood silent, staring blankly at the man before me. The man who once promised to protect me, now had become my biggest burden. David. My voice softened. Weary. I'm tired. This house isn't ours. It's in your mother's name. If I renovate it for $400,000 and something happens, what do I get? Where are my rights? Oh my God. Sarah. Your thoughts are so twisted. Are you wishing Mom would die quickly so we inherit? Or are you thinking we'll get divorced? David shook his head dramatically. You're too transactional. Husband and wife should trust each other. If you renovate this house, Mom will love you even more. The house will be peaceful. Peaceful because of new AC, or peaceful because her ego is satisfied? I sneered. I don't care, Sarah. David stood up, his face grim. Mom has already told her friends the renovation starts next week. If you don't give her the money, she'll be terribly humiliated. Do you want to see Mom have another stroke because of the embarrassment, the threat of illness, the ultimate manipulative weapon? That's not my problem, David. That's her problem for having too much pride, I replied firmly. David looked at me with a strange gaze. Okay, if you're stubborn, don't blame me if Mom takes drastic measures. You know how Mom gets when she's angry. David left the room, leaving me slumped on the bed. I grabbed my phone, checking my bank balance via mobile banking. That figure, the result of 7 years of hard work. Morning, noon, night, overtime until I got sick. Saving money by not buying branded bags for our future, and they wanted to blow it in an instant, just for marble and a kitchen set. No, This time I wouldn't back down. Sanity was more important than the status of a dutiful daughter-in-law. That evening, the house was as silent as a tomb. Kevin came out of his room only to get a drink, gave me a sneering look, then went back in. Apparently, he had already heard the morning's drama. At dinner, there was no bacon or delicious side dishes. On the table, there were only crackers and leftover stew from yesterday. Mrs. Bassislife Miller sat with a flushed face. David was silent. So, Sarah? Mrs. Miller broke the silence without ceremony. Tomorrow morning, the contractor is coming to collect a down payment of $100,000. Have you transferred it to David's account? I put down my fork. No, Mom. And I never will. Bang! Mrs. Miller slammed the table again. This time, the water glass overturned, soaking the tablecloth. You cheap woman, an ungrateful daughter-in-law! Mrs. Miller shrieked, her finger pointing directly at my nose. You live here for free, eat and sleep in my late husband's house. Now you're asked for a small contribution, and you're so difficult. Free? I stood up. The emotions I had suppressed all day finally exploded. Mom, just so you know, I pay the $800 electricity bill every month. Water, internet, HOA fees, security. I pay for all of it. Daily groceries, David's gas money, Kevin's allowance. It all comes from my wallet. David's salary is only enough to cover the car payments you forced him to buy last year so you could show off. Sarah, stop, David yelled, his face crimson because I was tearing at his dignity in front of his mother. Why stop? Let Mom hear the facts, I challenged. All this time I've been quiet to protect your dignity, David. But if I'm constantly bled dry like this, I have to speak up. Mrs. Miller's breath hitched, her eyes bulging as if they might pop out. She felt her position was threatened. She couldn't deny the fact that I was the financial backbone of this house. But her pride was too high to admit it. So she played her last card, the card of authority. Mrs. Miller quickly walked to the front door, opening it wide, letting the cool night air rush in. Oh, so you think you're so indispensable, so rich? Mrs. Miller turned, a cruel sneer on her face. Listen carefully, Sarah. I don't need your pocket change to pay the electricity. What I need is this renovation. If you won't follow the rules of my house, then get out. She took a long breath, then screamed loudly. Fund the $400,000 renovation, or leave this instant. Her hand pointed straight out into the dark night. I looked at David, hoping my husband would stand up, pull his mother back, and defend me, hoping he would say, Don't, Mom, Sarah is my wife. But David just sat there, frozen. When our eyes met, he looked away. His lips mumbled softly, but clearly enough for my sharp ears to pick up. Just go if you won't listen, Sarah. I'm tired of fighting. At that very second, my heart didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces, turning to dust. There was no more love, no more respect. Only cold logic remained. I smiled, a smile that confused Mrs. Miller slightly, because she expected me to cry and beg at her feet. Okay, I said loudly. I walked closer to Mrs. Miller, looking into her eyes without the slightest fear. I'm not spending $400,000. This isn't my house, and I choose to leave with my savings. Good, Mrs. Miller shrieked, though her eyes wavered slightly at my defiance. Get out of here, take all your junk. Don't expect to come crawling back begging for forgiveness. Don't worry, Mom, I said calmly. So calmly that David turned with a surprised look. I'll never come back to this hell. I didn't cry. It was strange. A wife being kicked out at night should be sobbing hysterically. But I felt light, as if a 200-pound burden had just been lifted from my shoulders. I went into the room and pulled out 2 large suitcases. I didn't pack flimsy sundresses or trivial trinkets. My priorities were clear. Important documents, diploma, birth certificate, marriage license, my car title. Yes, that car was in my name, and I bought it. My work laptop, the gold jewelry I bought myself, and of course, my bank tokens and savings account passbook. David entered the room as I was closing a suitcase zipper. He leaned against the wardrobe, arms crossed. He looked hesitant. Perhaps he thought I was just bluffing. "Are you really going?" he asked, a dismissive tone in his voice. "Where will you sleep at this hour?" "4-star hotels, David. I have enough money to rent a suite for a whole month," I replied, lifting my suitcase off the bed. David flinched. He forgot. I have money. All this time I lived. Simply because I was saving for us, not because I was poor. "Sarah, don't be childish." David tried to block my path. "Mom is just emotional. Apologize. Say you can pay half. I'll help you convince her." I looked at David with disgust. "Get out of my way, David. You're my wife. You can't leave the house without your husband's permission." David tried to partially quote religious texts, his bad habit of a husband who couldn't protect his wife's honor and instead supported his mother in extorting his wife. "You've lost the right to be obeyed," I replied coldly. "And one more thing, David. From this moment on, don't expect me to pay your credit card bill that's due in 2 days. Pay it yourself with your pitiful $3,000 salary." David's face turned pale. "Wait, that bill? It has the TV in Mom's room." "I don't care." I bumped his shoulder, dragging my suitcase out of the room. In the living room, Mrs. Miller and Kevin were sitting watching TV with the volume blaring, pretending not to care. Kevin smirked when he saw me dragging my suitcase. "Well, the drama queen is leaving. Awesome. My gaming PC can move into Sarah's room now," Kevin chirped. I paused for a moment in front of them. "Enjoy this night, Kevin, Mrs. Miller. Enjoy the lights, the running water, and the fast internet. Because starting tomorrow morning, I'm canceling all direct debits from my account. I hope you have cash to pay for everything." Mrs. Miller scoffed. "Oomph, you're so arrogant." "David works too. We can live without your money. We'll see about that," I mumbled. My ride-sharing app chimed. The driver was already out front. I didn't look back. I stepped out the door, breathing in the cold night air, which felt incredibly fresh. "Free, in the taxi?" The driver politely asked. "To the Horizon Hotel. As per the app, ma'am?" "Yes, please," I replied. I leaned my head against the seat. A single tear fell, not because I was sad to leave David, but sad at my own foolishness for enduring 5 years in that house. My phone vibrated. A WhatsApp notification from David. "Mr. David, don't regret this. If you come back, you'll have to kiss Mom's feet." I immediately blocked his number, Mrs. Miller's number, and Kevin's number. That night, I slept soundly. What happened in that house after I left, I only found out later from the HOA president, who was close to me. And this story is truly a satisfying irony. That night, around 10 p.m., just 2 hours after I checked into the hotel and ordered room service, Mrs. Miller's house suddenly went dark. No, it wasn't because I cut the power. The power company isn't that fast. The electricity went out because someone turned off the main switch from outside. According to the HOA president, Mrs. Miller started yelling for David. "David, did the electricity run out? Why is it off? Go fill it up." David, who was sulking in his room, came out with his phone flashlight. "It's not out of credit, Mom. There would be an alarm. This is a total blackout." Suddenly, there was a loud banging on the front gate. Rough, impatient banging. "Knock! Knock! David! Mrs. Miller! Come out!" A deep, hoarse voice called from outside. Kevin, who had been engrossed in his phone game on a dying battery, instantly turned pale. He knew whose voice that was. David, trembling, peeked out the front door. Behind the iron gate stood 3 burly men in black leather jackets. Their faces were menacing. One of them held a small crowbar. "What's the matter, sirs, at this hour?" David asked nervously. "Don't play dumb," snapped the biggest man. "Your brother, Kevin. He's been defaulting on interest for 3 months, boss. We've lost our patience. He promised to pay off the principal this week. Where's Mrs. Miller?" Mrs. Miller, who appeared behind David, gasped. "Huh? Debt? What debt does Kevin have?" The man laughed mockingly. Ma'am, your youngest son here has been playing slots and illegal online trading. He borrowed $100,000 from our boss. And the collateral is this house's deed. Mrs. Miller felt as if she'd been struck by lightning in broad daylight. She turned stiffly towards Kevin, who was now hiding behind the living room sofa. Kevin, the house deed! Mrs. Miller's voice soared, almost cracking. The house deed is in my safe in my room, Mom, and I always carry the key. Kevin trembled. Cold sweat poured down his face. Mom, I duplicated the key when you were showering last month. I thought I'd win the trades, Mom. If I won, the money would double. The deed could be redeemed without you knowing. Oh my God. Mrs. Miller shrieked hysterically, her legs giving way. She slid to the floor. Her proud house, the palace she wanted to renovate for $400,000, turned out to have its deed in the hands of loan sharks. We don't care about your family drama. The debt collector cut in. Tonight's the deadline. If there's no $100,000 for the principal and interest, we'll seize valuables as temporary collateral. Or tomorrow morning, we'll board up this house. David panicked beyond belief. Sir, please, sir, give us time. My wife has money. Wait a minute. David fumbled for his phone, trying to call me. Of course, his call didn't go through. The number you are trying to reach is busy. Damn. David cursed. Well, the debt collector pressed, hitting the gate with his crowbar. The ringing sound was loud, breaking the quiet of the neighborhood. Neighbors started peeking out their windows. Humiliation. Extreme humiliation for Mrs. Miller. Sarah is gone, Mom. David looked at his mother in despair. She took all her money. We have nothing, Mrs. Miller wailed. Her cries were heartbreaking, a mix of anger, regret, and fear. She just realized that the only person who could save them from the clutches of these loan sharks was the one she had just driven away 2 hours ago with harsh words. Go get her, David. Go get Sarah. Mrs. Miller hit David's legs, begging him to go back. Pay this debt quickly. But David just stood frozen in the dark porch. He knew the Sarah he had seen dragging her suitcase earlier was not the old Sarah, that Sarah would not come back with crocodile tears. That night, in the luxurious house that was now pitch black, Mrs. Miller's hysterical cries mingled with the shouts of the debt collectors who began hauling away the 60-inch LED television from the living room as collateral. Meanwhile, I was enjoying a warm bubble bath at the hotel, ordering seafood fried rice and watching a comedy movie. Karma, it turned out, came swiftly. The morning sunlight streamed through the blinds of my newly leased studio apartment. I woke up, not to Mrs. Miller's screams telling me to cook, or Kevin's impatient banging on the bathroom door. I woke up to the gentle alarm on my phone. 6 a.m. Silence. That was the first thing I felt. A luxurious silence. No blaring TV since dawn. No complaints about coffee not being sweet enough. No snide remarks about a daughter-in-law coming home too late from work. I got up and stretched my muscles, which felt far more relaxed than they had in the past 5 years. This apartment wasn't large. Just a 35-square-meter studio on the 18th floor. But to me, it was a palace. The furniture was minimalist and modern, exactly to my taste, which Mrs. Miller always mocked as having poor variety compared to her intricately carved, dust-laden Javanese furniture. I brewed coffee, expensive Arabica coffee that I used to hesitate to buy because David said it was wasteful. Better to buy cheap instant coffee to save money. Now, I brewed it just for myself. As I sipped my coffee on the balcony, watching the hustle and bustle of the city from above, my phone rang. Mr. Henderson, an investment client, appeared on the screen. Hello, good morning, Mr. Henderson. I greeted professionally. Good morning, Miss Sarah. I've read the portfolio proposal you sent last night via email. Excellent. Your risk analysis is very sharp. Honestly, I've seen 3 other consultants, but their calculations aren't as realistic as yours. When can we sign the contract? My smile widened. Thank you, sir. If you have time, we can meet at the cafe near your office this afternoon. Okay, deal. Oh, and Miss Sarah, because I like your work so much, I want to introduce you to my business partner, Mr. Davies. He needs a financial advisor to help organize his company's somewhat messy assets. The fee is quite substantial. Are you ready? Of course I'm ready, sir. Thank you so much for your trust. I hung up the phone, feeling elated. Before, whenever I came home with good news about a promotion or a new client, David would only respond coldly, "Oh, that's great. So, the bonus will come through? Can you add to the car service payment?" My achievements were only seen as an extra ATM. No appreciation. Only calculation. Now, my achievements were entirely my own. I got ready, choosing my best blazer. I applied a bit more makeup than usual to cover the lingering puffiness from lack of sleep on the first day of moving in. As I looked in the mirror, I saw a different woman. The Sarah in the mirror was no longer the dull Sarah who always looked down, afraid to say the wrong thing. This was Sarah in control. Before leaving, I opened my mobile banking app. Auto debit failed notification. Payment for electricity company name. ID 547X. Failed. Insufficient funds. Payment for internet provider name. ID 122X. Failed. Insufficient funds. I smirked. The account linked to all the house bills was my old personal account, which I had emptied and transferred to a new one. I deliberately didn't close access so they would receive those beautiful failed notifications. "Enjoy the darkness, David," I whispered to the mirror, then stepped out of the apartment with a light step. The oxygen outside felt so fresh today. On the other side of the city, in the house that was supposed to be renovated for $400,000, the atmosphere was stifling, both literally and figuratively. David woke up with sweat soaking his entire back. The wall fan in his room was off. The AC had been broken for a long time and hadn't been repaired because Mrs. Miller said, "Wait for the renovation. We'll replace everything then." So they relied solely on the fan. But this morning, the fan was still. "It's so hot." Kevin's shout came from the next room. David got up, his head throbbing. He hadn't slept well last night. The image of the debt collectors taking his mother's beloved 60-inch LED TV still haunted him. The living room was now empty. The rectangular dust mark on the wall where the TV used to hang was like a gaping wound that shamed them. David shuffled into the living room. Mrs. Miller was sitting on a wooden chair, fanning her layered neck with a woven bamboo fan, her movements rapid and full of emotion. Her face was flushed, her hair disheveled. "David, why is the power out again? Did the electricity credit run out?" Mrs. Miller snapped as soon as she saw her eldest son. "It's not out of credit, Mom. The breaker keeps tripping. I think there's a short, or the power company cut us off because of unpaid bills." David mumbled. "Cut off? What?" Sarah always arranged direct debits. Mrs. Miller snapped, forgetting that Sarah had been driven out. "Sarah is gone, Mom," David reminded her, his voice hoarse, "and she's blocked all payment access. The account that usually pays the electricity is empty." Mrs. Miller was silent for a moment, then threw her woven fan onto the floor. "That devilish woman. She wants to kill us slowly. David, go fix it. Use your money." David took a deep breath, suppressing the hunger gnawing at his stomach. "I'm out of money, Mom. This month's salary already went to car payments and Kevin's tab at the corner store. I only have $300 left to last until the end of the month." $300? Mrs. Miller's eyes bugged out. "Are you kidding me? What will we eat? What about electricity? Kevin needs internet data to look for a job." "Look for a job? He's still gambling." David finally exploded. He pointed at Kevin's room. "Because of your favorite son, our TV was repossessed. The house deed is mortgaged. And now you're still thinking about his data plan? Don't blame your brother. He's a victim of fraud." Mrs. Miller blindly defended. "It's your fault for not being able to manage your wife. If Sarah were still here, she could have solved a small problem like this. You're a man, the head of the household. How can you be so useless?" David gave a bitter, very bitter laugh. "Savings, Mom? All this time? My salary was only $3,500. The car payment you forced me to buy so you could show off at your bridge club was $1,500. That left $2,000. You demanded $500 a week for groceries. How could I save? All this time we lived comfortably because of Sarah's money. Sarah paid for everything. Oh, that's just your excuse for being wasteful. Mrs. Miller turned away, refusing to accept the facts. I don't care. Turn on the electricity now. I want to take a warm bath. My rheumatism is acting up. David looked at his mother with a disheartened gaze. A warm bath. The water heater needed electricity. Prepaid electricity tokens had to be topped up, and in his wallet there were only $200 bills. No warm water, Mom. The gas is also out, David said coldly. What? The gas is out? The water cooler is empty. Only half a bag of rice left. David detailed their miseries that morning. Kevin! Get out here. Kevin emerged from his room, looking disheveled, in a ripped tank top. What's up, bro? So noisy. Can I get a hotspot? My data's out. Gotta log in for my daily bonus. Without warning, David slapped Kevin hard across the cheek. Thwack. Kevin stumbled backward, clutching his burning cheek. Bro, are you crazy? You're the crazy one? David shouted, tears streaming down his face from frustration. You mortgaged this house. You made Sarah leave. And now you're still thinking about games? Get out there and earn some money. Be a day laborer, busk, whatever. Just don't be a parasite here. Mom! Bro, David hit me. Kevin whined like a child. David, don't be rough with your brother. He's stressed. Mrs. Miller smacked David's back. David backed away, looking at the two people before him as if they were monsters. Whatever. Whatever you want. I'm going to work. Don't expect good food tonight. David grabbed his car keys and jacket, leaving the house that felt like a giant oven. On the street, he realized his gas tank light was flashing. He had to fill up. His remaining $300 dwindled by $20. At a red light, David cried inside his helmet. He just realized that for 5 years he had never thought about trivial things like gas, electricity tokens, or an LPG tank. Everything was always available, like magic, and the sorceress had just been driven away by him. 1 week passed. The situation did not improve. It only worsened. David sat at his desk in the shipping company where he worked as an administrative assistant. His head felt like it would explode. On his computer screen wasn't work, but a tab containing a list of bills he had compiled in Excel. He was trying to calculate his family's cash flow without Sarah. The result was a total deficit. All this time, David had lived in a comfortable bubble of ignorance. He thought his minimum wage salary, plus Sarah's small help, was enough for his mother's luxurious lifestyle. He was gravely mistaken. He looked at the list of monthly bills Sarah used to pay, which he found from torn scraps of paper in Sarah's old vanity drawer. Electricity, 3 AC rooms always on. Electronics, $1,500. Internet gamer package, Kevin's demand, $350. HOA fees. Elite complex security and cleaning, $250. Groceries. Mrs. Miller insisted on meat daily, $2,000. Mrs. Miller's skincare, medication, supplements, $700. Car gas and maintenance rarely used, but had to be started daily, $500. Total recurring expenses, $5,300 per month. David swallowed hard. His salary was only $3,500. That had already been cut by the $1,500 car payment. That left $2,000 to cover the $5,300 needs. Crazy. David cursed. How did Sarah cover the $3,300 deficit each month by herself? He just realized how big Sarah's salary was and how great his wife's sacrifice had been. Sarah never complained, never asked for expensive bags. Sarah wore the same work shoes for 2 years. Meanwhile, her money was eaten by the termites in David's house. David's phone vibrated. A call from the home number. He was reluctant to answer but feared an emergency. Hello, David, the water's out. The water pump is making a buzzing sound and smoking. Mrs. Miller's panicked voice came from the other end. Well, Turn off the switch, Mom, before it catches fire. I already did. Now what? I need to use the toilet, and there's no water to flush. Call a repairman now. The repairman charges $100 just to come, Mom. Not even including parts. I don't have any money. What good are you, David? Mrs. Miller started crying. Back when Sarah was here. We'd just call someone and it would be fixed in an hour. You're supposed to be a man, the head of the household. How can you be so useless? Sarah again. Sarah again. Every sentence that came out of his mother's mouth now compared David's incompetence with Sarah's efficiency. Yet, Mrs. Miller used to be the one who most often called Sarah an insolent daughter-in-law, because she rarely cooked. It turned out Sarah didn't cook because she was busy earning $2,000 to cover her mother-in-law's lifestyle. Mom, listen. David lowered his voice so his colleagues wouldn't hear. Ask Kevin to get water from the neighbor's well or buy a refillable water jug to flush. I'm at work. Don't bother me now, or I'll get fired. David hung up. He rubbed his temples. Next to him, his colleague Don looked sympathetically. What's up, man? You look terrible. I'm stressed, Don. My wife left. My mom's sick. My brother? Oh, never mind. That's why, man. A smart, money-making wife should be cherished, not mistreated, Don quipped casually, but his words struck David's heart. I heard a rumor you kicked your wife out because she wouldn't renovate your mom's house. Is it true? David was silent. Gossip spread so fast, maybe from the neighbors who heard the shouting that night. Sorry, man. Don continued, sipping his coffee. If I were your wife, I'd leave too. You're a man, David. Do you let your dignity depend on your wife's wallet? Those words were like a backhand slap. David wanted to get angry, but he knew Don was right. He wasn't the head of the household. He was just a parasite who happened to have the status of a husband. That afternoon, David returned home with a heavy heart. As he reached the gate, he saw a pathetic sight. Kevin was sitting on the porch with an empty bucket, waiting for the roving water delivery truck. His face was grimy, his hair greasy. Mrs. Miller was sitting in a lounge chair, wearing a sweat-soaked duster, fanning herself furiously. The house looked gloomy. The peeling paint that Mrs. Miller complained was faded now looked even duller without the light of beautiful garden lamps. The bulbs were out, and no one had bought new ones. The grass was growing tall. It's only been a week. David thought in horror. What if it's a month, a year? Saturday night, which was usually cheerful, had now become a night of destiny for Kevin. He was cornered. The loan sharks had given him an additional 3 days before boarding up the house, on the condition that he pay $8,000 in accrued interest. David was dozing on the living room sofa because his room was too hot. David's wallet lay on the table. Kevin glanced at the wallet. He knew his brother had just been paid, even if David said he was broke. There must still be something left in the ATM. Kevin knew David's ATM PIN. Their mother's birthday. Quietly, Kevin took the ATM card. He crept out, racing his jet ski to the nearest ATM. Just this once, please, Kevin muttered as he inserted the card. Balance, $250. Kevin snorted in disappointment. Only this much? Broke ass. But for a gambler like Kevin, $250 was capital. If I go all in on the hot slot tonight, it could turn into $500. Then I'll spin it again and it could be $1,000. I can pay the interest. The rest is for spending. The twisted logic of an addict. Kevin deposited the money into his gambling account. He sat on the curb, his eyes fixed on the cracked screen of his phone. He started pressing the spin button. For the first 10 minutes, he won a little. His balance rose to $400. Adrenaline surged. Come on, just a little more. 5 minutes later, he lost repeatedly. The balance dropped to $50. Kevin panicked. He increased his bet to try and recover quickly. One more spin. 0 balance. Kevin stared blankly at his phone screen. David's last money, the money that was supposed to buy food for the next week and gas for work, vanished in minutes. Kevin trembled. He didn't dare go home. David would surely kill him, but he had nowhere else to go. Finally, with heavy steps, he went home, slipped the ATM card back into David's wallet, and pretended to sleep. The next morning, chaos erupted. David was getting ready to go to the grocery store for rice and eggs. At the convenience store cashier, his card was declined. "Sorry, sir. Insufficient funds," the cashier said. "No way, I still have $250, David argued. "The balance is zero, sir. Only a $5 minimum balance remaining." David checked his transaction history via mobile banking. There was a transfer to a virtual account under a payment gateway name. 11 p.m. last night. David instantly knew the culprit. He raced his jet ski home like a madman. Upon arriving home, he immediately dragged Kevin, who was still asleep, out of bed. "Wake up, you thief!" Thwack! A punch landed on Kevin's jaw. Kevin stumbled backward. "Help, bro! I just wanted to get my money back. I thought I'd win." Kevin cried in fear. "Get your money back with my food money? Now we'll eat rocks, huh?" David beat his brother wildly. Mrs. Miller shrieked, trying to separate them. "Stop, David. Stop. Your brother made a mistake. You always defend him, Mom. This is the result. We'll starve because of him." David pushed his mother gently until she sat on the bed. David's breath was labored. He stared at his empty wallet, desperate. The only way out was to borrow money. David tried calling his old buddies. "Hey man, can I borrow 300? I'll pay you back next payday." Friend 1, "Sorry, David. My wife just gave birth." Friend 2, "Dude, your bike's nice. Just sell the exhaust pipe." Friend 3, Don, "David, you should ask your wife for help. I'm broke, man." All doors were closed. David finally did the most humiliating thing for him. He opened Instagram, searching for Sarah's account. Her account wasn't private, but he couldn't send messages. DMs were blocked. He could only see Sarah's latest post, uploaded 2 hours ago. A photo of Sarah sitting in a fancy Japanese restaurant, smiling broadly, holding a cup of green tea. In front of her was a plate of delicious-looking sushi. Caption: "Self-reward after closing a big deal. Peaceful life, full stomach. Thank God." David swallowed hard. His stomach growled. In this house, they had just had a big fight, and there was no rice. There, Sarah was eating sushi. David typed a comment with a fake account. Since his real account was blocked, how could you flaunt food while your mother-in-law starves? Unfilial wife. 5 minutes later, the comment was gone. The fake account was also blocked. Sarah didn't care. Sarah wasn't reading that drama. David threw his phone onto the sofa. He felt so small, so helpless, and so hungry. Prolonged stress caused Mrs. Miller's condition to worsen. 3 days after the zero balance incident, Mrs. Miller fainted in the bathroom. Her mouth was slightly drooped, minor stroke symptoms. David panicked terribly. Kevin, of course, couldn't be relied on because he had run off to his friend's house. Afraid of being beaten by David again, David carried his mother into a ride-sharing car, which he paid for using the Pay Later feature on the app, because he had no cash. Their destination was the nearest public hospital. Since they had no money for VIP or first-class care and Sarah was no longer paying for Mrs. Miller's private health insurance, David had to use public health coverage. Basic class. The procedure was long. The queue was endless. The hospital was crowded. The smell of medicine mixed with human sweat. Mrs. Miller was placed on a stretcher in the emergency room hallway because the rooms were full. "It's hot, David." "I can't take it, Mrs. Miller whimpered, her speech slurred. "Be patient, Mom. We're waiting for the doctor." David fanned his mother with her registration papers. He himself hadn't eaten all day, only drank water from the mosque tap. 2 hours later, Mrs. Miller was finally briefly examined and given an IV. David had to buy medicine at a pharmacy, not covered by insurance. It cost $250. David had to pawn his watch at a pawn shop near the hospital just to buy that medicine. As David was leading Mrs. Miller, who hobbled out of the hospital lobby to wait for a cheap taxi, a gleaming black Cadillac Escalade stopped right in front of the main VIP drop-off area. The car door opened automatically. A uniformed driver stepped out to open the passenger door. Out stepped a woman in an elegant ivory blazer, shimmering high heels, and a handbag that probably cost David a year's salary. Her hair was perfectly styled, her skin radiant and well-maintained. It was Sarah. She looked expensive. A complete 180-degree turn from the Sarah who used to wear a duster while sweeping Mrs. Miller's yard. Sarah walked, accompanied by a dignified-looking middle-aged man. Her client, Mr. Davies. They laughed softly, seemingly visiting a colleague in the VIP pavilion. David's heart stopped for a moment. Mrs. Miller, seeing her eyes widened. Her slurred mouth tried to speak. Sarah. Unconsciously, David stepped forward. Sarah, he called, his voice hoarse. Sarah stopped. She turned towards the sound. Her eyes scanned the crowd of ordinary people in the lobby, then locked onto David. David, disheveled, wearing a t-shirt that hadn't been changed in 3 days, faded jeans, and a face covered in an unruly beard. Beside him, Mrs. Miller, sitting in a decrepit hospital wheelchair, looked old and pathetic. David hoped Sarah would soften. He hoped Sarah would run to him, cry at the sight of her mother-in-law's condition, then pull out her credit card to move Mrs. Miller to VIP. David raised his hand, waving awkwardly. Honey, Mom's sick. Sarah looked at them, her face devoid of expression. No hatred, but also no pity. That gaze was empty, as if David and Mrs. Miller were strangers she didn't know. This way, Mr. Davies, Sarah said to her client, then turned around and walked into the air-conditioned, fragrant VIP area. She ignored them, completely ignored them. David was frozen, his hand still hanging in the air. The shame spread from his toes to the top of his head. People around them began to whisper. Seeing the scene, David, go after her. Mrs. Miller weakly hit David's thigh. She has money. Ask her. David slowly lowered his hand. No, Mom. We no longer exist to her. We're just trash. That day, David realized one painful truth. The distance between him and Sarah was no longer just a physical distance between a house and an apartment, but the distance between heaven and earth. And David was the one who dug the hole to bury himself in that earth. The atmosphere in Mrs. Miller's house was no longer like a home, but like a waiting room for an execution. 3 days after the hospital incident, David forcibly brought his mother home. Not because she was cured, but because they ran out of money for inpatient care. Mrs. Miller now lay in her stuffy room, the AC broken, her speech slurred, and the left side of her body difficult to move. The minor stroke left permanent traces due to delayed treatment and accumulating stress. That afternoon, the sky was heavily overcast, as if mourning the fate of the house's inhabitants. Kevin, who had disappeared for a while, suddenly came home with a bruised face. He'd been beaten up on the street, whether for gambling debts or other issues. David was too tired to ask. Hungry, bro? Kevin whined, holding his stomach. David, who was spoon-feeding his mother instant porridge bought with spare change from his childhood piggy bank, looked at his brother with an empty gaze. There's leftover rice from yesterday. Eat that. It's stale, bro. Spoiled. Eat it or starve. Choose. David replied flatly. Suddenly, the roaring sound of motorcycles could be heard blaring outside the gate. Not ordinary visitor bikes, but large, intimidating motorcycles revving their engines. Crash, crash. The iron gate was violently pounded. Mr. David! Come out! David put down the porridge bowl. His heart pounded. Nausea rose to his throat. He knew this day would come, the deadline for paying the $8,000 interest or the seizure of assets. David walked out with heavy steps. In front of the gate, the 3 debt collectors who had come a few days ago were back. But this time, they brought a neatly dressed man, holding a red folder. Where's the money? The bold ringleader asked without preamble. I don't have the money yet, sir. Please give me more time. My mother is seriously ill with a stroke. David tried to plead, using his mother's condition as a shield. Who cares if your mom's sick? Your mom dying is none of my business. The bald man spat on the ground. Lujanji 3 hari. Iniuda 3 hari. Mana? The neatly dressed man stepped forward. Mr. David, I am a representative from the informal lending institution that your brother Kevin signed with. As per the agreement, due to the breach of contract, the collateral, which is this house deed, will be executed. The man handed David a piece of paper. An eviction notice. We are giving you 72 hours to voluntarily vacate this house. If by sunset of the day after tomorrow you are still here, we will forcibly remove your belongings and padlock this house. David held the paper with trembling hands. The letters on the paper seemed to dance mockingly. Vacate, seize, execute. Sir, this is our only home. Where will we live? David almost cried. That's your problem. The bald man cut in cruelly. Your brother mortgaged it. Your brother signed it, and your family bears the consequences. It's your own fault for having a stupid brother. They left after firmly placing a large red sticker on the house gate. Property under supervision. A sticker that became the biggest shame in that neighborhood. From inside the room, the sound of a glass breaking. Mrs. Miller, who had been eavesdropping from the window, dropped her water glass. So shocked, she wailed. Her cries were incoherent, just heart-wrenching. Arg. Huss. David went into the room hugging his hysterical mother. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry, Mom. But deep down, David knew apologies couldn't redeem this multi-million-dollar house. There was only one way out, the path that most painfully wounded his dignity as a man. He had to beg his ex-wife. The next day, David was desperate. He wore the best shirt he had left, which was a bit wrinkled because it hadn't been ironed. The washing machine was broken, and he was too tired to iron by hand. He hastily shaved his beard, styling his hair with water. He had to look presentable to be allowed into Sarah's office building. The skyscraper in the financial district soared, gleaming in the sun. David had picked Sarah up here a few times before, but he always waited in the motorcycle parking lot, feeling intimidated by the fragrant, well-dressed office workers. Now, he had to enter that lobby. At the reception desk, David was stopped. Excuse me, sir. Do you have an appointment with Miss Sarah? The beautiful receptionist asked, her gaze scrutinizing. David's appearance, despite his best efforts, still exuded an aura of hardship. His worn-out shoes couldn't lie. I'm her husband. Ex-husband, David pleaded. It's an urgent family matter. Life and death, ma'am. One moment, please, I'll check. The receptionist called upstairs. David waited nervously, his foot tapping on the cold, luxurious marble floor. The AC in the lobby was very cold, a stark contrast to his house, which was like an oven. I'm sorry, sir. Miss Sarah is in a meeting and cannot be disturbed. She requested not to receive personal visitors during office hours. The receptionist replied politely but firmly. Ma'am, please, ma'am. David began to panic, his voice rising. Tell Sarah. Her mother is seriously ill. The house is about to be repossessed. I just need 5 minutes. The security guard approached. Sir, please calm down. Please wait outside. No, I want to see Sarah. David struggled as the security guard grabbed his arm. A small commotion ensued. Several passers-by turned their heads. David no longer cared about embarrassment. He just needed money. Suddenly, the elevator chimed. The doors opened, and Sarah emerged with 2 foreign clients. She looked very professional, speaking fluent English. David saw an opening. He broke free from the security guard's grasp and ran through the gate. Sarah. Sarah stopped. She turned. Her face registered surprise for a moment upon seeing David, breathless in the middle of the luxurious lobby. But her expression quickly turned icily cold. She apologized to her foreign clients, then signaled for the security guard to let David approach. Sarah walked towards David. She didn't lead David to a private room. She stood there, in the middle of the lobby, letting David become a spectacle. What do you want, causing a disturbance in my office? Sarah asked. Her voice was low but sharp. David looked at Sarah. This woman was so radiant, so far out of his reach. David's knees gave way. Unconsciously, he dropped to the floor. David knelt on the cold marble floor, in front of dozens of pairs of eyes from other employees. Sarah, help me, Sarah, David cried. His tears fell, dripping onto Sarah's high-heeled shoes. Mom's house is being repossessed tomorrow. The loan sharks are kicking us out. Mom had a stroke, Sarah. She's partially paralyzed. Please, please, lend me the money. I promise I'll pay it back. I'll do anything. Please redeem that deed. Sarah didn't back away. She also didn't bend down to help David up. She stood tall, looking at the top of David's bowed head. How much? Sarah asked, simply. David looked up. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. 400,000. Sarah, that's the principal and interest. I'll pay it back for life. Sarah laughed, a dry, humorless laugh. 400,000? You're asking for 400,000? Yes, Sarah. You have it, don't you? You're successful now. Stand up, Sarah commanded. David stood up with difficulty, hoping Sarah would pull out a checkbook. But instead, Sarah pulled a folder from her work bag. It seemed she had prepared this, as if she knew David would come one day. Follow me to the cafeteria. Don't make a scene in the lobby, Sarah said, then turned around without waiting for David. In a quiet corner of the cafeteria, Sarah threw the folder in front of David. David opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a printout of bank statements for the past 5 years. There were multicolored highlights marking thousands of transactions. Read, Sarah commanded. Sipping her iced Americano, David read line by line, marked with yellow highlighter. Transfer to David. Car payment, $1,500. Transfer to hospital, mom's cataract surgery, $8,000. Transfer. David's credit card payoff, $3,000. Roof renovation payment, $15,000. Transfer. Kevin's allowance, $250, and so on. Page after page. I had my finance team compile everything, Sarah said calmly. The total amount I've spent on you, your mother, your brother, and that house over our 5 years of marriage is, Sarah pointed to the bold figure on the last page, $900,000. $900,000? David's eyes widened, his mouth agape. 900,000? Yes, Sarah replied. That's my money. My hard-earned money. Money that could have bought me 2 apartments. Money that should have been my retirement fund. But it's gone, David. Gone to cover your mother's pretentious lifestyle, your brother's laziness, and your incompetence as a husband. Sarah looked David directly in the eyes. And now you come here begging for another 400,000? What do you think I am? A charity organization or a fool? But Sarah, this is an emergency. Mom could die if she's evicted. David tried to defend himself, though his voice was barely a squeak. Your mother evicted me, David. Remember? Sarah cut in sharply. She pointed at the door, screaming at me for that foolish renovation. At that time, did you think about my feelings? Did you think about where I would sleep? No, you sided with your mother. I was wrong, Sarah. I regret it. I was foolish. David hit his own head. Punish me, Sarah. But please, help Mom. This isn't about punishment, David. This is about consequences. Sarah closed the folder abruptly. That $900,000? Consider it my charity to shake off bad luck. I've accepted it. But to add another 400,000? Not a single dime. I will not give it to you. Let the house be repossessed. That's a lesson for your mother that pride can't pay debts. It's a lesson for Kevin that gambling destroys lives. And it's a lesson for you that a man needs principles. Sarah stood up, straightening her blazer. Go home, David. Enjoy the consequences of your actions. Don't ever look for me again. My lawyer will send the divorce papers next week. Sign them, or I'll sue you for that $900,000 in court. That was checkmate. David knew he had no choice. If Sarah sued him for restitution, he could go to jail for fraud or embezzlement within the marriage. Considering many assets in Sarah's name had been sold by David on the sly, Sarah walked away, leaving David slumped in the cafeteria chair. The coffee in front of him was cold as his fate. Eviction day arrived. Exactly 72 hours later. That morning, the neighborhood was in an uproar. A large moving truck parked in front of Mrs. Miller's house, not a truck carrying Italian marble for renovations, which Mrs. Miller dreamed of, but a truck for used goods. 6 thugs, sent by the loan sharks, entered the house without removing their shoes. They began to carry away the sofa, cabinets, refrigerator, and dining table. "No! Don't take my cabinet. It's solid cherry wood," Mrs. Miller shrieked in her slurred voice. She sat in a borrowed wheelchair from the clinic, trying to hit the hands of the thug who was carrying her beloved display cabinet. "Move aside, lady. This is being repossessed." The thug brushed Mrs. Miller's hand away. Kevin just sat in a corner of the porch, sobbing like a child. He didn't dare resist, because his face was still bruised from yesterday's beating. David was busy putting their clothes into ramen noodle boxes. Their good suitcases had been sold yesterday to buy food. Now, they only had cardboard boxes. Neighbors began to gather. The HOA president, Carol, Mrs. Miller's bridge rival, and other neighborhood ladies watched from behind their fences. "Oh my poor Mrs. Miller," Carol whispered, her tone not sounding pitiful at all, but rather satisfied. She was bragging about a $400,000 renovation yesterday. Turns out the deed was mortgaged for her son's gambling. "Yeah, that's what happens when you're arrogant." She drove away a good daughter-in-law like Sarah. "That's karma," the HOA president chimed in. Those voices were clearly heard by Mrs. Miller. The shame was far more painful than her stroke symptoms. She felt naked. She felt all her dignity stripped away one by one as her luxurious belongings were loaded onto the truck. David, close the gate. I'm so embarrassed," Mrs. Miller whimpered. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. "There's no point in closing it, Mom. Everyone already knows," David replied apathetically, taping up the last box. At noon, the house was empty. Only dust and paper trash remained on the floor. Baldy, the head debt collector, padlocked the gate with a heavy chain. "Debt settled. The remaining $25,000 is forgiven because the house value, if auctioned, is quite high. You should be grateful I'm benevolent." David looked at his childhood home for the last time. The house where he grew up, where he married Sarah, where he mistreated the best woman in his life. "Come on, Mom, let's go." David pushed his mother's wheelchair. Kevin walked behind, dragging a cardboard box, looking down deeply to avoid the neighbors' stares. They walked out of the complex, accompanied by looks of pity mixed with disgust from people who used to respect Mrs. Miller. Their new life began in a cramped rental unit in a rundown area near the riverbank. It was only 10 x 13 feet. The bathroom was inside, but it smelled of stale urine. There was no gold kitchen set, only a single burner on the floor. There was no soft mattress, only a thin foam mattress spread on the floor. It was incredibly hot because the roof was asbestos, and the ceiling was low. "I don't want to be here, David. It stinks. It's hot," Mrs. Miller whined as David laid her on the foam mattress. "Just bear it, Mom. This is all we can afford," David said, wiping away sweat. The remaining money from selling their meager belongings was only enough for a month's rent, $300, and a week's worth of food. The first night in that rental was a nightmare. Mosquitoes feasted, rats scurried in the ceiling, and loud, blaring music from the next-door neighbor was deafening. David couldn't sleep. He sat by the door, smoking a cigarette he bought from spare change. He thought about Sarah. What was she doing now? She must be sleeping in a soft king-size bed in a fragrant, air-conditioned room. Suddenly, David heard a rustling sound inside. In the dim light of the street lamp filtering through the ventilation, he saw Kevin's shadow rummaging through David's fanny pack. "Kevin, what are you doing?" David snapped. Kevin jumped in surprise. He held something in his hand. "Nothing, bro." Kevin immediately ran out the door, bumping into David, who fell backward. "Thief! Kevin, come back!" David tried to chase after him, but Kevin, whose body was smaller and nimbler, darted into the dark, narrow alleys. David checked his fanny pack. Empty. His remaining $150, their last money for a week's food, and David's gold wedding ring, which he planned to sell tomorrow if things got desperate, all gone, stolen by Kevin. "Kevin, you scoundrel!" David screamed into the dead of night. His shouts echoed in the grime-filled alley, met by the barking of stray dogs. David fell to the muddy ground. He wept and wailed. He had lost his home. He had lost his wife. He had lost his job for constantly skipping work, and now he was betrayed by his own biological brother, whom he had defended fiercely in front of his wife. Inside the rental, Mrs. Miller woke up hearing David's screams. She tried to call out, "David! Where's Kevin? I'm thirsty." But there was no Kevin. Her favorite son, her golden child, had gone, taking with him their last hope, leaving his paralyzed mother in the hands of a brother whose mental state had completely shattered. David returned to the rental, his gaze empty, like a living dead man. He saw his mother staring at the door, waiting for Kevin. "Kevin won't be back." "Mom," David said coldly. "He brought our food money. Your favorite son has abandoned you." Mrs. Miller fell silent. Tears streamed down her face in silence. For the first time, she realized that the monster who had destroyed her life was not Sarah, but the result of her own upbringing. And that regret came too late. Far too late. The family court building that morning was busy. Yet to me, it felt eerily quiet and cold. I sat on a bench in the corridor, accompanied by my lawyer, Mr. Howard. I wore a navy sheath dress with a matching blazer. Dark sunglasses concealed my eyes, which were not at all puffy. On the contrary, my eyes sparkled with the promise of the future. Across the aisle sat a figure I barely recognized. David, in just 3 weeks since that eviction. He had aged 10 years. His body was gaunt, his cheekbones prominent, and his skin dull and sunburnt. His best button-down shirt, the one I had bought him for his birthday, looked threadbare and too large on his shrunken frame. He sat alone. Mrs. Miller was not with him, being paralyzed. Kevin was not with him, being on the run. David hung his head, wringing his dirty hands. His nails were black. It seemed he was doing odd, rough jobs. Case number 15. Miss Sarah and Mr. David, the clerk called. We entered the mediation room. The mediating judge, a wise middle-aged man, attempted the standard procedure of reconciliation. "Mr. David, your wife is seeking a divorce on grounds of economic abandonment and marital discord due to third-party interference, namely your parents. Do you wish to defend yourself or reconcile this marriage?" the judge asked. David looked up, his eyes red and watery. He looked at me, a pathetic, pleading gaze. "Your Honor." David's voice was hoarse, like someone who hadn't had water in a long time. "I still love my wife. I made a mistake. I beg you, give me a second chance. My mother is seriously ill. Sir, my wife is our only hope." I let out a soft snort, loud enough for the judge to turn. "Excuse me, Your Honor." I interjected firmly. "He's not asking for reconciliation out of love. He's asking for reconciliation because he needs a free nurse and a walking ATM for his mother. Your Honor, you heard his last sentence. My wife is our only hope. Economic hope." "He means," David stammered. "It's not like that, Sarah. I promise I'll work hard. I'll change." Mr. Howard, my lawyer, opened a thick file. "Permission, Your Honor. These are the proofs that during 5 years of marriage, my client bore 90% of the family's financial burden, including paying off the defendant's brother's gambling debts and the defendant's mother's lifestyle. My client also suffered verbal abuse and was evicted from the house whose operational costs, ironically, were paid by my client." Mr. Howard presented photos of bank transfer confirmations, chat logs of Mrs. Miller's insults, and the loan shark's collection notice addressed to Kevin at their home. The mediating judge read the documents, shaking his head. He looked at David with an unreadable expression, a mix of pity and disbelief. "Mr. David," the judge said slowly, "as men, our dignity lies in responsibility. If this data is correct, you not only failed as a leader, but you burdened your follower beyond reasonable limits." David bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. He cried. Not a cry of genuine regret, but a cry of helplessness. He knew he had lost. He knew he had nothing to offer to make me return. "Sarah." David tried to reach for my hand across the table. I quickly pulled my hand away. "Don't touch me. You're filthy." The words came out abruptly. Harsh, but honest. I felt disgusted imagining that hand had once slapped his brother for money. That hand had once pointed at my face, defending his mother. And now that hand was stained with the ruin he had brought upon himself. Mediation failed. The judge declared, "We'll proceed to the final judgment hearing in 2 weeks." I stood up, nodded politely to the judge, and walked out without looking back at David, who was still sobbing in the defendant's seat. To me, he was already dead. All that remained in that room was a ghost of the past. While I enjoyed a Wagyu steak lunch with my lawyer to celebrate the smooth hearing, David returned to his personal hell. That cramped rental unit. The smell was even more potent today. The stench of urine mixed with damp mold on the walls. David opened the flimsy plywood door. The first sight he saw was Mrs. Miller lying sideways on the thin foam mattress. Her duster was wet at the bottom. She had wet the bed again. And because David had no money to buy adult diapers, the urine had soaked into the mattress. "David," Mrs. Miller called weakly. Her eyes were hollow. Her face, once glowing from expensive clinic treatments, was now wrinkled and covered in dark spots. Her hair, once styled high like a socialite, was now partially bald from stress-related hair loss and matted with sweat. "Yes, Mom," David replied flatly. He placed a wrapped package of takeout rice, the cheapest rice plate with only tempeh and vegetable soup, on the floor. "Where's Sarah? You met Sarah at court, didn't you?" Mrs. Miller asked hopefully. "Is she coming back? Is she coming to get us?" "Tell her, Mom misses you. Mom wants to apologize." David laughed bitterly as he took off his shoes, whose soles were worn through. "You're still dreaming, Mom. Sarah won't come back. She's disgusted with us. She came with an expensive lawyer, in a fancy car. She didn't even want to shake my hand." Tears streamed from the corners of Mrs. Miller's eyes. "But Mom is sick. David, I want a warm bath. I want to sleep on a soft bed. My back hurts here. Be grateful we're not sleeping under a bridge, Mom," David snapped. His patience was completely gone. All day he had been a day laborer at the wholesale market. His back felt like it would break for a meager $20 wage, and coming home, he had to listen to his mother's pampered complaints. "This is all your fault, Mom." David pointed at his mother's face. "If you hadn't been so obsessed with status, hadn't demanded that $400,000 renovation, hadn't driven Sarah away, we would still be living comfortably. We'd still have AC, a car, good food. Sarah was the best wife, but you squandered her. But Mom only wanted a nice house for you too." Mrs. Miller defended herself in a trembling voice. "For me? Please. It was for showing off to your bridge club, wasn't it? Where are your bridge club friends now? Does anyone visit? Does anyone bring rice?" "No one," David screamed. He kicked an empty water bottle, sending it flying against the wall. Mrs. Miller sobbed. Her heart was broken, not by David's outburst, but by the truth of his words. She remembered the faces of Carol and her friends who blocked her number as soon as they found out she was broke. They were disgusted. The only person who had been truly sincere with her all this time was Sarah, the daughter-in-law she had called Country Bumpkin. David took a deep breath, trying to calm his emotions. He approached his mother, lifting her frail body with his remaining strength. "Come on to the bathroom, I'll bathe you," he said gruffly. In the cramped, moldy bathroom, David splashed cold water from a bucket over his mother's body. Mrs. Miller shivered. "It's cold, David. Slowly. It hurts." "There's no hot water," David retorted, scrubbing his mother's back. As he soaped his mother, David looked at his own hands. Hands that were once soft from office work, now rough, calloused, and covered in scratches. He remembered how Sarah used to massage his hands after work. The memory was agonizing. "Karma is real, isn't it, Mom?" David whispered softly, more to himself. "We're paying for all our sins against Sarah." That afternoon, they ate their takeout rice in silence. Hard rice, bland vegetables. In the distance, the call to prayer from the mosque could be heard. Tomorrow was Eid al-Adha. Sarah used to sacrifice a lamb in Mrs. Miller's and David's names every year. This year, they couldn't even afford rice for tomorrow. 2 weeks later, the final judgment hearing, David arrived late because the bus he was on broke down. He ran towards the courtroom, breathless, sweat soaking his identical shirt. As he entered, The judge had just pounded his gavel, toot toot toot, granting the plaintiff's petition in its entirety, announcing a single divorce decree against the defendant in favor of the plaintiff. David's world collapsed instantly. The sound of that gavel was the death knell for his hopes. It was over. Final. He was divorced. Poor. Unemployed. Sarah stood, shaking the judge's hand, then her lawyer's, with a wide smile. A smile so free, as if she had just won a lottery worth billions. David walked closer with faltering steps. He wanted to speak, but his throat caught. Sarah turned to leave the room. Her eyes met David's. "Sarah?" David whispered faintly. Sarah paused for a moment. She didn't avoid him this time. She looked at David from head to toe, that same auditing gaze as in the cafeteria that time. "Congratulations, David. You're free now," Sarah said calmly. "Now you can be a dutiful son entirely for your mother, without the interference of this stingy wife." That sentence was sarcasm at its highest level, piercing his heart. "Sarah, I just want to apologize. I swear to God I regret it. If only time could be turned back." David choked. Tears fell again. Sarah sighed. A little pity, but her rationality remained in control. "Time can't be turned back, David. A broken mirror, even if glued back together, the cracks will still show and will cut if you touch it. I've forgiven you. Seriously, I hold no grudge. But to come back? Impossible." Sarah opened her bag, pulling out a white envelope. "This isn't alimony. You have no rights to that. This is my last charity to you. For your mother's adult diapers and for your capital to find an honest job. Don't use it for gambling like your brother." David received the envelope with trembling hands. He felt its thickness, perhaps $3,000 or $5,000. David's dignity was completely shattered receiving that money. But his stomach and his mother's needs forced him to grasp it tightly. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you." David bowed, almost prostrating himself. "Take care, David." "Goodbye," Sarah said, her voice final. She walked away. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the courthouse floor, moving further and further away until she disappeared behind the door. David stood alone in the emptying courtroom. He hugged the envelope to his chest, crying silently. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, but for David, the world was pitch black. 6 months later, I opened the gate to my new home. It wasn't a palace-like mansion from a fairy tale, like Mrs. Miller's dream, but a modern tropical cluster home, lush with greenery. And most importantly, it was my own, in my name. Today, I was holding a small housewarming gathering, inviting only orphans and a few close friends, including Mr. Henderson and Mr. Davies, my loyal clients who were now my business mentors. "Wow, your house is so cozy, Sarah. Such positive energy," Mr. Davies praised, as he sampled the tiered cake. "Yes, sir. There's no negative energy from ghost in-laws," I joked. Met with their appreciative laughter. They knew a little about my past and were very supportive of my decision to divorce. I walked to the backyard, sitting by the koi pond. The murmuring sound of the water soothed my soul. I used to be afraid of being a divorcee. Society's stigma, the fear of living alone, the fear of loneliness. But it turned out this solitude was far better than toxic togetherness. I had full control over my life. My salary was intact for investments and donations. My mind was focused on my career and my new hobby. Painting. I slept soundly every night, without fear of what bills I would have to pay tomorrow for someone else's mistakes. My phone rang. A message from the old HOA president. "Mrs. Sarah, how are you? Just wanted to let you know. Yesterday, David's old house was sold at auction. A Chinese family bought it and renovated it beautifully. Oh, and I heard Kevin was arrested in Vegas for grand theft auto. David, poor thing, is working as a parking attendant at the strip mall in front of the complex. He's so skinny." I read the message with a flat feeling. Kevin in jail? I expected it. David as a parking attendant? That was a consequence. I replied briefly. "I'm doing well. Thank you for the update. Hope this serves as a lesson for us all." I put down my phone and sipped my iced tea. It tasted sweet, fresh, without any bitterness. Just like my life now. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. A delivery driver brought the painting I had ordered. The driver was handsome, polite, and had kind eyes. His name was Liam, a safe name, not a figure from the past. "Thank you, sir," I said. "You're welcome, Miss Sarah. Your painting is beautiful. You have great taste," he said with a genuine smile. I smiled back. Maybe one day I will open my heart again, but not now. Right now, I am in love with myself, with my freedom, and with this expensive tranquility. 1 year passed. The wheel of life turns, and sometimes it stops at the most ironic point to deliver a final lesson. That Saturday night, I had a dinner date with Liam. Yes, the painting delivery driver turned out to be a young architect who was moonlighting to help a friend's business. And we had grown close. We ate at a famous seafood restaurant in an upscale strip mall area. I was driving my new car, a sleek white SUV. The parking area was very crowded. "Left, ma'am." "Straight back." "Hop." The parking attendant's voice was loud, directing my car into a small spot. I smoothly parked the car. I grabbed a $5 bill from the dashboard for a tip. I always appreciated parking attendants who did their job well. I rolled down the window. "Thanks, sir." "Here." My hand paused in the air. The parking attendant, wearing a faded orange vest, a worn-out cap that covered half his face, and a whistle hanging around his neck. He looked up to receive the money. His hollow eyes met mine. Time seemed to stop. The sound of honking and the hustle and bustle of the street vanished. David. It was David. His face was dark and sunburnt. There was a scar on his temple. His teeth looked yellow and unkempt. The smell of sweat and street dust wafted from him. He looked far older than his 30s. Like an old man, David stared at me, dumbfounded. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He saw my car, seeing my elegant attire, seeing Liam, who was sitting in the front passenger seat laughing at his phone. David saw the happiness he once had, now owned by someone else. And he was the one who had cleared the path for that happiness to leave. David's hand trembled as he took the $5 bill. It was money that to me was probably just parking change. But to him, it might be dinner for his paralyzed mother in their cramped rental. "Ra," he whispered, his voice lost in the wind. I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I just looked at him with a gaze that said, "It's over." There was no longer any anger, only the realization that God's destiny was just as could be. I slowly rolled up the window. David's face was gradually obscured by the tinted glass. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He just stood there, frozen, clutching that $5 bill tightly, while tears streamed down his dirty, dusty cheeks. I got out of the car, taking Liam's arm, and walked into the brightly lit restaurant. Filled with the aroma of delicious food, behind me, in the dark parking lot, David blew his whistle again. Prit! The sound of that whistle echoed like a cry of regret that would never end. I didn't look back. I stepped forward. My true life had just begun.